It was a cold, rainy night when Abigail stood at the gates of her father's mansion, her suitcase soaked, her heart pounding. She had never imagined her life would come to this, kicked out, abandoned by the only parent she had ever known. Just hours earlier, she was living in luxury, surrounded by marble floors and designer clothes. Now she was alone, betrayed, and with nowhere to go. Her father, Richard Kingston, a billionaire known for his power, influence, and ruthless decisions, had just made one that would change both of their lives forever. All because she refused to follow the path he had planned for her. 3 years have passed since that night. Abigail is no longer the sheltered daughter of a billionaire. She's now a waitress at a small diner in a quiet town, far away from the glitz and glamour of her old life. She wakes up at dawn, feeds her baby boy, and rushes off to work, juggling long shifts and sleepless nights. But through it all, she holds her head high, determined to build a life on her own terms. The smile she gives customers might seem warm and casual, but behind it is a story of heartbreak, survival, and strength. Her baby, just a toddler now, is the light of her life. With eyes as sharp and familiar as someone from her past, he's full of energy, curiosity, and an uncanny resemblance to a man she hoped never to see again. It's a resemblance that's hard to ignore, especially for those who knew Richard Kingston. Word travels fast, even in quiet towns. One morning, a man in a suit walks into the diner, orders a coffee, and stares just a little too long. His phone buzzes, and a photo flashes across the screen, a photo of Abigail, taken from behind the counter. That photo, minutes later, ends up in the hands of Richard Kingston. For 3 years, he thought he had erased her from his life. But now fate has other plans. What happens when the man who turned his back on his own daughter sees a child who looks just like him? Is it regret, curiosity, or something far more complicated? As the past catches up and secrets threaten to spill, Abigail's quiet life is about to be turned upside down once again. And just when she thinks she's finally free of her father's shadow, he walks through the door. Abigail froze. Her hand tightened around the coffee pot as her eyes locked with his. It had been 3 years, but she would know that face anywhere. Richard Kingston didn't look any different, still dressed in the finest tailored suit, still carrying himself like he owned the world. But this time, he wasn't looking at her with anger or disappointment. No, his expression was unreadable. Cold, calculating. She couldn't tell if he had come for revenge, forgiveness, or something else entirely. She quickly turned away, pretending not to notice him. Her heart raced as she picked up a tray, her fingers trembling. The diner suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. The clinking of silverware and quiet conversations faded under the weight of his presence. She glanced toward the kitchen, hoping to disappear, but it was too late. Richard had already stood up and started walking toward the counter, step by step, slow, purposeful. 3 years ago, he had thrown her out for refusing to marry the man he chose, someone from a powerful family, a business deal more than a relationship. Abigail had dreams of her own. She wanted to write, to travel, to fall in love for real. But her father didn't believe in dreams, only in control. And when she told him she was pregnant, with no intention of revealing the father's name, he lost it. In his eyes, she had shamed the family, ruined everything he had built. She remembered the screaming, the final words he said before slamming the door behind her. "You're not my daughter anymore." Now he was standing right in front of her. "Abigail," he said, voice calm but firm, "we need to talk." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked over at the small corner booth where her son was quietly coloring, unaware of the storm that had just walked into their lives. His chubby hands clutched a red crayon, and a soft hum escaped his lips as he focused on his drawing. Richard followed her gaze, and for a moment, everything stopped. His eyes narrowed, jaw tightening ever so slightly. "Is that him?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Abigail didn't reply. Her silence was answer enough. There was so much she wanted to say, so many words built up over the years. But all she could do was stand there, caught between her past and present, between fear and strength. Richard looked again at the boy, then back at her. The silence between them was sharp, filled with questions neither of them was ready to answer. And then, as if the universe wasn't done testing her, another face appeared outside the diner window. One she never thought she'd see again. The man outside the diner window didn't move. His hands were stuffed deep into the pockets of a weathered jacket, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. But Abigail recognized him instantly. Jason, the boy she once loved, the one her father never approved of, the father of her child. She hadn't seen him since the night everything fell apart, since the night she told him she was pregnant, and he disappeared without a word. Her breath caught. She didn't know who she was more afraid of, Richard, who stood just feet away, or Jason, who now stood on the other side of the glass. Her hands trembled again, but this time from the weight of too many emotions crashing into her all at once. Guilt, fear, anger. Questions that had haunted her for years suddenly rose back to the surface. Why had Jason left? Why now? And how did both of them, Richard and Jason, find her at the exact same time? Richard hadn't seen him yet. His focus was still on the child, on the boy who shared his piercing grey eyes. The billionaire's mind was already spinning. Abigail could see it in the way his eyes moved, analyzing, calculating. She had lived her whole life trying to earn his approval. Now she feared what he might try to take. "Does he know?" Richard finally asked. She didn't answer. Her voice felt stuck in her throat. Outside, Jason stepped closer to the window, catching her eye. His expression wasn't smug or angry. It was full of something she didn't expect, regret, pain, like he'd been carrying his own secret burden all these years. He raised a hand slowly, unsure, and then hesitated. Richard turned, catching the movement outside. Their eyes met. For a second, it was like the diner went completely still. Neither man blinked. The tension between them was sharp and immediate, as if they both knew exactly who the other was and what he meant to Abigail. "I see," Richard muttered, his voice low, almost to himself. He straightened his cuffs and took a small step back from the counter. "So this is what you chose." Abigail felt her heart crack open. That tone, it was the same one he used the night he disowned her. Cold, final. But now it wasn't just disappointment. There was something else beneath it. Maybe pride, maybe fear, she couldn't tell. From the corner booth, her son looked up, sensing something strange. He smiled and waved toward Jason at the window. Jason smiled back, his eyes glassy. And in that moment, Abigail knew nothing about this was over. It was only just beginning. The door to the diner creaked open, and Jason stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, it felt like the air in the room shifted. The hum of conversation died down. Even the cook in the back peeked out from the kitchen window, sensing something heavy hanging in the air. Abigail stood frozen between the two men, her past and her future, both staring her down like ghosts that refused to stay buried. Jason's eyes met hers first. "Abby," he said softly, his voice hoarse, like he hadn't spoken her name in years. "I didn't know where you went. I've been looking for you." Richard scoffed quietly behind her, folding his arms across his chest. "Touching," he muttered, with a hint of sarcasm. "So now you show up, after vanishing the moment she needed you most." Abigail's eyes darted between them, panic rising in her chest. She didn't want a scene, not here, not in front of her child, and certainly not in the middle of the diner where curious eyes were already watching from behind coffee cups. Her son, sensing the shift in energy, slid out of the booth and walked over, tugging gently at her apron. He didn't understand what was happening, but he felt it. She knelt beside him, running a hand through his hair. Jason took a small step forward. "I didn't leave on purpose," he said, directing his words at her but loud enough for Richard to hear. "Your father made sure I disappeared. I got a letter from you after weeks, but by then, I had already lost everything. I didn't know she was pregnant." Abigail's heart skipped. What do you mean, he made sure? Jason's jaw tightened. I lost my job, Abby. My apartment. I was locked out of everything overnight. No calls, no mail. And I thought you changed your mind, that maybe you regretted everything. Richard didn't deny it. His silence said enough. He stared at Jason like he was a nuisance, a problem he thought had been erased. Now, that problem stood tall in front of him, with truth on his side. Why are you both here now? Abigail asked, her voice cracking. Why today? Neither man answered right away. Jason finally said, because I found out about him. I saw a photo online, on a friend's social media. I knew it was you. I knew he was mine. Richard stayed silent, then finally stepped closer to the child. And what if he's mine? He said, his voice low, steady. He looks like a Kingston. Abigail stepped between them, her arms outstretched protectively. The diner went completely still. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. And just like that, everything was about to break. Abigail's breath caught in her throat. The moment Richard said it, what if he's mine? Everything inside her froze. Jason blinked, stunned, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. Her son clutched her hand tighter, confused by the sudden tension. The diner, once filled with clinking dishes and quiet chatter, felt like it had fallen into a vacuum. Every eye was now on them, and every second stretched into silence. You think what? Abigail asked slowly, her voice shaking. You think he's yours. Richard's eyes didn't flinch. I know what I said the night you left, but I also know what happened before that. The letters, the fights, and the timing. His gaze flicked to Jason. She wasn't the only one you were hiding from, was she? Jason took a step forward. Don't twist this. Richard didn't blink. She was vulnerable. You walked away. Or maybe you were just a distraction. Abigail shook her head. No, stop. Her voice broke. This isn't about you. It was never about you. This child, my child, is not some prize you both get to fight over. But deep down, her mind started spinning. Richard was cruel, but not irrational. He had always been cold, controlling, but never careless. And suddenly she remembered something buried from the past. Her father had intercepted her mail once. Had she miscalculated the dates? Was it even possible? Jason turned to her, pain in his eyes. Abby, is there a chance? Even the smallest chance he's right? I don't know, she whispered, barely able to say the words. I thought I did. Just then, the door to the diner opened again. A woman stepped in, sharp heels, long coat, clipboard in hand. She walked with purpose, stopping just behind Richard. Mr. Kingston, she said calmly, the test is ready. Jason's face turned pale. Test? What test? Richard didn't look at him. A DNA kit. I had a feeling when I saw the boy's face. My team acted quickly. You had no right. Abigail started, but the woman cut her off. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said, but you live in a public space. No samples were taken directly from the child, just a spoon, a napkin, standard trace collection. Abigail's knees nearly buckled. You went behind my back, again, just like before. Jason looked like he was about to explode. You violated her privacy. That's his son. You think money gives you the right to decide everything. Richard remained calm, even smug. I don't need to decide. The truth will. And then the woman handed him a sealed envelope. He held it up, his fingers slow and deliberate, just before tearing it open. But he didn't read it. Instead, he looked at Abigail. You open it. Abigail stared at the envelope in her father's hand, her stomach twisting into knots. It felt like everything, her choices, her pain, her strength, was being reduced to a piece of paper. Her son clung to her leg, unaware of the storm that hovered above him. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing against the smooth paper. For a moment, no one said a word. Then she took the envelope, her hands shaking as she opened the seal. The silence in the diner was deafening. Abigail unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Her eyes moved across the page, scanning the results. She swallowed hard. Her voice trembled as she read the words quietly to herself. Then, finally, she looked up. "He's Jason's son," she said. "There's no doubt." Jason let out a breath like he'd been holding it for years. His eyes filled with something between relief and heartbreak. He looked at his child, his son, and his lips trembled into a small, stunned smile. But Richard, he didn't flinch. He stood tall, unreadable, eyes locked on Abigail. "So," Richard said, voice even, "you chose your path." Abigail nodded. "I chose my life. I built this life. Without your money, without your name." Jason stepped beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back. "And now I'll be here too, like I should have been." For a moment, it seemed like the storm had passed. But just as Abigail exhaled, Richard reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. "This is a custody claim," he said quietly. "I've already filed it. You may have the biology, Jason, but I have resources, influence, and a name. A Kingston should be raised with power, not scraping by in a diner." Abigail's breath caught. "You're trying to take my son." "I'm protecting my legacy," he said. "And whether he's mine or not, he carries my bloodline. I don't abandon my own." The words cut deep. Jason's fists clenched. "You abandoned her the moment she needed you most." "And look what she became," Richard replied coldly. "A waitress, with a child she could barely feed." Abigail stepped forward. Her voice was no longer shaking. "He doesn't need your money. He needs love, safety, a real father. And he has that now." The diner doors swung open again. A uniformed officer stepped in, scanning the scene before walking straight to Abigail. "Miss Kingston," he said, "I have paperwork here from Child Services. You're going to want to see this." She frowned, confused, as she took the file from his hands. Inside wasn't a custody claim against her, but one asterisk she had unknowingly won. It was custody of something else entirely. Control of a trust. Left by her mother, hidden for years. And suddenly, the power shifted. Abigail stared at the papers in her hand, her mind racing to catch up. The officer gave her a respectful nod before stepping back. She flipped through the documents, recognizing her mother's handwriting in the attached letter, delicate, familiar, and emotional. Her mother had created a private trust in Abigail's name before she passed away, one that Richard had kept hidden for years. It was meant for Abigail and her future child, with clear instructions. It could only be claimed once Abigail became a mother and was living independently on her own terms. Jason leaned over her shoulder, reading the letter with her. His eyes widened as the truth sunk in. This wasn't just money. It was proof that Abigail's mother had always believed in her, that she saw the strength her daughter would one day need, and left her a gift that could protect her and her son forever. The trust wasn't massive, but it was enough to move out of the diner, to start fresh, to give her child a better future without ever needing to look back. Richard's face turned pale. He took a small step forward but said nothing. For once, he had no control. No advantage. He realized too late that everything he had tried to control, Abigail, her choices, her future, had only pushed her to become someone stronger than he ever expected. His silence felt heavier than anything he could have said. Abigail folded the papers and looked him in the eyes. "You may have tried to erase me, but she never forgot me, and now I know who I am, who I've always been." Richard didn't argue. He turned without a word, walking out of the diner with the same quiet steps he had entered with. But this time, he didn't look back. Jason knelt beside his son, who was still clutching his crayon drawing. "Can I see that?" he asked gently. The boy nodded and handed it over. It was a messy sketch of a house, a sun, and 3 stick figures holding hands. Jason smiled through tears. "You're quite the artist." Abigail watched them, a warm ache in her chest. For the first time in a long while, things felt right. Not perfect, not easy, but right. She wasn't the billionaire's daughter anymore. She was her own person, a mother, a fighter, and now a provider too. As the sun broke through the clouds outside, she stepped out of the diner with Jason and their son. A new chapter waited ahead, one built not on wealth or names, but on truth, love, and the family she created for herself. And that was more valuable than anything money could ever buy.